They say betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from the people you break bread with, and mine came with a slice of birthday cake. My name is Natalie Monroe, and on the night of my 34th birthday, I sat at the head of a long, candle-lit table at a 5-star restaurant in Charleston, surrounded by the very people I once called my tribe: my husband, my sister, my mother, and a dozen family friends who had watched me grow from toddler to wife. I was wearing the dress Carter, my husband, had gifted me that morning. He'd kissed my forehead, told me how beautiful I looked, and whispered that this year was going to be our year. I believed him, like a fool. Carter raised his glass first. "To Natalie," he said, voice warm and familiar. "The love of my life. Happy birthday, sweetheart." Applause, smiles, cheers, but not from my sister. Courtney looked like she wanted to crawl out of her skin. She shifted in her seat, glanced at our mother, then stood up. "Before we eat," she said, I have something to say." Everyone turned to her. I already knew what she was about to say. I'd known for weeks, but I sipped my champagne and waited. "I'm pregnant," she said, "and the father is Carter." The room froze. Someone dropped a fork. My mother gasped but didn't look shocked, more like she was rehearsing her reaction. Carter, seated beside me, didn't even flinch. His hand stayed firmly on the back of my chair, his face neutral, as though he'd been preparing for this moment. Everyone stared at me, waiting for the screaming, the tears, the slap, the drama. But I just smiled. "That's quite an announcement," I said calmly. "Congratulations, you two. I actually have something to share as well." I reached into my purse and pulled out a cream envelope, placing it gently in the center of the table. "For the past 2 years," I said, "Carter and I have been trying to start a family. And when nothing worked, I decided to dig a little deeper." Courtney's eyes narrowed. Carter shifted uncomfortably. I opened the envelope and pulled out 2 sheets of paper. "Turns out," I continued, "my husband Carter has a condition called azoospermia. That's a fancy way of saying he's completely infertile. 0 sperm count. Not low. 0. Gasps now. A murmur ran through the table. I looked straight at Courtney. "Which means whatever's growing in your belly, dear sister, didn't come from my husband." Carter's face turned white. "Natalie," he said under his breath, "we should talk about this in private." "No, Carter, we won't, because you didn't keep anything private when you were sneaking around with my sister behind my back." I pulled out the second envelope and dropped it on his lap. Different clinic, different doctor, same result. Courtney's voice cracked. "That's not possible. He said..." "I know what he said." I stood up, gathering my purse. "But I prefer facts over fairy tales, and the fact is, your little plan to humiliate me tonight, it just backfired spectacularly." I looked around the table one last time. To everyone who knew and said nothing, "You're no better than they are." Then I walked out. Head held high, heels clicking against the marble floor, not a tear in sight. Because they expected me to collapse. What they never expected was that I came prepared to burn it all down. The thing about betrayal is, once you spot the first lie, you start seeing them everywhere. 2 days after the birthday dinner explosion, I was back in my own home, or what was left of it. Carter hadn't come back since that night. Good. I needed the space. I needed the silence to think, to feel, to begin peeling back the layers of deceit that had crept into my life like ivy. The house was eerily clean, his favorite coffee mug still in the sink, his cologne still lingering in the bedroom. It made me sick. I opened my laptop, pulled up our shared cloud storage, and started searching. I wasn't just going to walk away from this with a broken heart. I was going to walk away with answers, and what I found changed everything. Hidden in an old folder labeled Finances 2021 were screenshots of transactions I hadn't authorized, large wire transfers, to a private account in Courtney's name. I recognized the bank. It was the one she used in college. The dates lined up almost perfectly with the months Carter and I had started trying harder for a baby, when he was supposedly working late, going to consultations, doing everything he could to make it work. Except now, I knew he wasn't. He wasn't working late. He wasn't at the clinic. He was funding my sister's lifestyle. And maybe even her lies. I called my best friend, Taylor. "Tell me I'm not crazy," I said as I forwarded her the screenshots. "Sweetheart," she said after a pause, "you're not crazy. You were just really, really trusting." I let out a bitter laugh. That's over. We met up at a quiet cafe 2 hours later. I needed someone to help me think strategically. Not emotionally. Taylor was a former litigator, cold, sharp, and loyal to the bone. "Here's what we do," she said, pulling out her tablet. "You collect everything: emails, texts, medical records, transfer receipts, anything that proves intent to deceive. We're not just going after a divorce here, we're going for legal consequences." I nodded slowly, the numbness finally beginning to thaw into something else: resolve. "There's more," I said, pulling up a photo on my phone. It was Courtney, taken a week ago, outside the very same fertility clinic Carter and I had visited a year earlier. I tailed her there after I saw the email on Carter's iPad. Taylor raised an eyebrow. "She's still going?" "Prenatal checkups," I said. "She used her old insurance card, one she had when she was still dating her ex, Justin." Taylor leaned back, whistling softly. "So Carter may not even be the father." "I don't think he is. She's been messaging Justin behind Carter's back. I have screenshots, likes, comments. A little too friendly for an ex." Taylor looked impressed. "You could bury them with this. That's the plan." That night I went home and pulled out the planner Carter used to mock me for. He said only control freaks used paper these days. But every date, every lie, every moment I second-guessed myself was in there. I marked each time he canceled a fertility appointment, each time Courtney just happened to stop by, each time my mother defended her over me. They thought I was fragile, but what I was methodical. I made one last entry that night. In neat handwriting, I wrote, "This is the beginning of the end, for them." A week later, I found myself parked in front of a modest suburban home, the one Courtney had been sneaking off to every Thursday afternoon under the excuse of yoga. Except the woman never owned a mat, and she certainly hadn't been stretching. I sat in my car across the street, hands clenched on the steering wheel as I watched her step out of her SUV, adjusting her sunglasses and checking her reflection in the car window. She was glowing, smug, pregnant, confident. She rang the doorbell twice. The door opened, and there he was, Justin, her ex-boyfriend from college, the man she claimed to have blocked, the one who broke her heart and never deserved her. He stepped out with a wide grin, kissed her on the cheek, and wrapped his arm around her waist. I took a photo, then another, then a third, just for good measure, as they disappeared inside together, like a couple playing house. This wasn't about yoga, and it wasn't about Carter anymore either. It was about the layers of betrayal these two had wrapped around me like a gift, only for me to rip it open and find it empty inside. That night, I met Taylor again. I handed her the photos and a printed copy of the paternity consent form I drafted. "He'll sign it," I said flatly. "He has no idea what she's trying to pin on Carter." Taylor glanced through everything and nodded. "You're ready." We spent the next several days gathering the final pieces. Bank statements showing the shady wire transfers, my own medical records proving I'd been fertile all along, screenshots of messages between Carter and Courtney, including one chilling thread where he reassured her, "She won't find out. She's too trusting." Too trusting. That was their entire strategy. So I decided to become someone they wouldn't recognize. I stopped returning Carter's texts, stopped responding to my mother's veiled scoldings about forgiveness and grace. Instead, I set a date. My lawyer, Ryland, helped me draft the dinner invitations. Cream-colored cardstock, elegant print. It looked more like a wedding announcement than a declaration of war. Courtney would see it and think I was ready to move on, that I had finally matured past my outburst at the birthday dinner, but she didn't know that every fork at that table would be polished with truth, every glass filled with consequences. I mailed them all out on a Tuesday. By Thursday, I got a voicemail from Carter. "Hey, babe, I think we should talk before the dinner. Just smooth things out. No surprises this time, okay?" I didn't call back. Instead, I sent Ryland everything, every document, every screenshot, every thread of evidence that proved Carter had been manipulating me financially and emotionally for years. "Deliver it the day after the dinner," I said. "Let them have one final night of peace." Then I went home, packed a small suitcase, and moved into a short-term rental across town. No forwarding address, no explanation, just silence. Because when you take away a liar's stage, they lose their voice. And I wanted to see what happened when they had to speak only the truth, with no audience left to clap. The night of the dinner arrived, cloaked in tension so thick you could practically slice it with the edge of a butter knife. The venue was a private room at the Hollow Birch, a sleek little place known for its intimate atmosphere and obscenely overpriced entrees. Exactly the kind of place Courtney always claimed to hate, but secretly adored when others footed the bill. She arrived first, wearing a pale pink wrap dress that clung a little too tightly to her second trimester bump. She looked radiant, polished, expectant, smug. I gave her my best smile and motioned for her to sit beside me. Across the table sat my mother, already sipping wine like she was bracing for an earthquake, and next to her Carter, wearing a too-tight suit and the smile of a man who thought he was still in control. He wasn't. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice smooth as silk. "I know things have been complicated lately, but I wanted this dinner to be a moment of clarity, for all of us." Courtney raised a perfectly arched brow. "That's very mature of you, Claire." I took a sip of my water. "Isn't it just?" The appetizers came and went. Small talk drifted around the table like smoke, meaningless and thin. I let them think they were winning, let them laugh about Carter's new promotion, about Courtney's pregnancy cravings, about how this family has been through so much. And then, right as the main course was served, I reached for my purse and pulled out a slim manila envelope. "This," I said, "is a paternity test, conducted with full consent, validated by 2 separate labs, and legally notarized." Courtney froze mid-bite. Carter set his knife down with a clatter. My mother's fork dropped to her plate. "What are you talking about?" Carter asked, his voice already tense. I placed the document at the center of the table. "Turns out the child Courtney's carrying isn't yours, Carter." Silence. "You're lying," Courtney whispered, her voice trembling. "No," I said softly. "You did that. All I did was uncover the truth." Carter grabbed the paper, eyes scanning rapidly, his face draining of color with each line. Courtney looked like she'd been slapped. "That's impossible," she said. Carter and I, we were sleeping together behind my back?" I finished. "Yes, and yet somehow you still managed to get pregnant by your college ex." I slid my phone across the table, open to a series of photos. Courtney entering Justin's house, Justin kissing her belly on his front porch, time-stamped and dated just 2 weeks before the supposed conception window. "No," Courtney breathed. "You had me followed?" I leaned in. "You involved me in your lie. I just took the liberty of untangling it." Carter sat back in his chair like the air had been knocked out of him. My mother reached for her wine glass with shaking hands. "You told me." Carter's voice cracked. "You told me the baby was mine." Courtney's eyes filled with tears. "I thought it was. I didn't know for sure." "Oh, don't give us the trembling lip performance," I snapped. "You knew, and you gambled that I'd be too broken, too desperate for family, to question it. You gambled wrong." I stood up, gathering the rest of my documents and slipping them back into my purse. "Enjoy your dinner," I said, turning toward the door. "And Carter, your company's legal department will be calling tomorrow. I've forwarded them the proof of your financial misconduct." "What misconduct?" my mother asked in horror. I paused in the doorway. "Let's just say all those business trips he billed to his corporate card were spent in very questionable company." And with that, I left. Behind me, voices rose, chairs scraped, reality collapsed. But me? I walked into the night with my head high and my silence louder than any of their denials. The fallout was swift and glorious. By the time I got home from that dinner, my phone was already buzzing. Angela had sent screenshots of Courtney's social media, which had gone from curated pastel bliss to complete radio silence. Comments flooded her last post. "Is it true? Was the baby really Carter's? You're disgusting if you did that to your own sister." I turned my phone face down on the kitchen counter and poured myself a glass of wine. It tasted like freedom. The next morning, I met with my attorney, the same one who had been helping me quietly gather documents and prepare for what I knew was coming. "I've officially filed for divorce," Ryland said, sliding the paperwork across the table. "Given the circumstances, Carter's going to be in for a very rude awakening." "Let him wake up choking on the consequences," I replied. He smiled. "And the embezzlement?" "Every receipt, every falsified report, in the hands of his company's legal team." I leaned back in my chair. Let him explain how he used corporate funds to finance a secret apartment for Courtney while gaslighting me into thinking I was paranoid. That afternoon, Carter called me. I didn't pick up. He left a voicemail instead. his voice hoarse, frantic, shifting between apology and outrage like a man unraveling. "Claire, please, I didn't know. I didn't think. You didn't have to destroy everything." But I hadn't destroyed anything. He had. I just removed the veil. That night, I drove past my mother's house. Courtney's car was in the driveway, and so was Carter's. The porch light was on, illuminating them standing in the front yard, yelling at each other while my mother wrung her hands between them like some Greek tragedy chorus. Angela called as I was parked down the street, watching the chaos unfold. "Thought you'd want to know," she said. "Courtney tried to contact Justin. He's lawyered up." "Good," I replied. "Let her see what custody court looks like from the losing side." A week later, Carter was suspended from his position pending a full financial investigation. His company had seized his accounts, frozen his access, and issued a statement about integrity and leadership. Translation: he was toast. Courtney, meanwhile, was outed by more than just me. One of Justin's friends leaked text messages, screenshots of her begging him not to say anything, promising he'd never have to take responsibility. Public opinion turned on her like wolves. And my mother? She did what she always did, tried to sweep it under the rug. She showed up at my door with a forced smile and a Tupperware of lasagna. "I think we all overreacted," she began. "No," I interrupted. "You chose a side. Now live with it." She opened her mouth, closed it, and finally walked away without another word. And that was peace. Not the kind you find in forgiveness, the kind you earn through fire. A month later, the divorce was finalized. I walked out of that courtroom with my head held high, a generous settlement in my favor, and my future finally back in my own hands. Angela met me outside the courthouse, arms open. "So, what now?" she asked as we walked down the steps. I paused, took a breath. "I think I'm done with revenge." She raised an eyebrow. "Really?" I smiled. "Because I've won. Not just legally, not just financially. I've won because I know who I am now. No more letting them define me. No more giving chances to people who treat loyalty like a weapon." I looked out at the city ahead of me, bright, open, new. "I'm going to build something better," I said. "Not for them, for me. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone near enough to burn it down."